From New York, this is Democracy Now! In the final weekend of the election season, police in North Carolina pepper sprayed voters heading to the polls during a Get Out the Vote rally in the city of Graham. At least 8 people were arrested, including the rally organizer, Reverend Greg Drumright, who'll join us. Meanwhile, in Texas, a caravan of Trump supporters tried to run a Biden campaign bus off the road. One truck swerved into a car full of Biden campaign workers. Trump responded by tweeting, "I love Texas." Joe Biden condemned the political intimidation.
We've never had anything like this. At least we've never had a president who thinks it's a good thing.
Plus, we go to the key battleground state of Florida to speak with Haitian-American author Edwidge Danticat to talk about how 250,000 U.S.-born children could be separated from their parents if Trump wins re-election and terminates temporary protected status for migrants. We'll also speak to a 13-year-old U.S.-born girl who is the daughter of TPS recipients from Haiti.
So if you vote, you can make a difference in what happens to me and all those other children.
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman. One day ahead of Election Day, over 94 million people have already cast their ballots, more than 2/3 of the total number of ballots cast in 2016. In Graham, North Carolina, police arrested 8 people and unleashed pepper spray during a peaceful Get Out the Vote rally in March, which planned to end at the early voting site. The participants started at a black church and stopped at a Confederate monument opposite the county courthouse to honor George Floyd and Black lives before law enforcement officers in riot gear attempted to clear them out. Officers then started pepper spraying the crowd that included young children and elderly people. North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper and rights groups condemned the police action. We'll have more on this after headlines with the event's organizer, Reverend Greg Drumright. The Texas Supreme Court on Sunday denied a Republican request to invalidate nearly 127,000 drive-through votes cast in Harris County. Harris County set up 10 drive-through polling sites for early voting, which ended Friday and Election Day, to make voting easier and safer for Texans during the pandemic. However, the outcome of the case is still not guaranteed, as the Republican plaintiffs also filed suit in federal court, which is set to hear the case this morning. One of the plaintiffs is Stephen Hotze, a coronavirus and QAnon conspiracy theorist, who said, quote, "The deep state could have been the ones that orchestrated this whole viral problem with the virus." During the racial justice uprising this summer, Hotze told Texas Governor Greg Abbott in a voicemail he should order the National Guard to kill protesters. He said, quote, "Shoot to kill the sons of bleeps. That's the only way you restore order. Kill 'em," Hotze said. Joe Biden campaigned in the battleground states of Michigan and Pennsylvania over the weekend, blasting President Trump over his handling of the coronavirus pandemic and the climate crisis. This is Biden speaking at a socially distanced drive-in rally in Philadelphia Sunday.
This is the most important election of our lifetimes. We're at an inflection point. So we have to vote like we never did before. Every day. Every day is a new reminder of how high the stakes are, of how far the other side will go to try to suppress the turnout.
Axios is reporting President Trump plans to declare a premature victory Tuesday night if he's ahead of Joe Biden in early returns. Election forecasters say vote counting after Election Day will likely favor Biden, particularly in Pennsylvania, even if Trump holds an early lead. Trump denied the report Sunday, but told reporters he opposed counting ballots after November 3rd.
I think it's a terrible thing when people or states are allowed to tabulate ballots for a long period of time after the election is over.
Trump also suggested he expects to win any election cases that land before the Supreme Court. This is Trump at a packed campaign rally in Pennsylvania Saturday.
If we win on Tuesday, or, thank you very much, Supreme Court, shortly thereafter.
On Sunday, senior Trump campaign advisor Jason Miller came under fire for suggesting Democrats could attempt to steal the election by counting ballots after Election Day. Miller spoke with ABC News.
If you speak with many smart Democrats, they believe that President Trump will be ahead on election night, probably getting 280 electoral, somewhere in that range. And then they're going to try to steal it back after the election. We believe that we will be over 290 electoral votes on election night. So no matter what they try to do, what kind of hijinks or lawsuits or whatever kind of nonsense they try to pull off, we're still going to have enough electoral votes to get President Trump reelected.
The FBI is investigating after motorists with Trump 2020 flags surrounded and harassed a Biden campaign bus driving down a Texas highway. Video shows one truck swerving into a car reportedly full of Biden campaign workers. Trump defended the drivers, tweeting, "These patriots did nothing wrong," and that the FBI should instead investigate Antifa. Meanwhile, hundreds of Trump supporters and their cars blocked traffic on the New Jersey Turnpike and the Mario Cuomo Bridge in New York on Sunday. Coronavirus cases in the United States topped 9.2 million as scientists warn the virus is spreading at a faster rate than before and hospitals will be pushed beyond capacity. On Friday, nearly 100,000 new cases were reported, the highest single-day number of cases recorded for any country. A Stanford University study found Trump rallies between June 20th and September 30th may have led to over 700 COVID-19 deaths and 30,000 new cases. Trump has repeatedly discouraged and mocked mask wearing while continuing to hold events with tightly packed crowds with minimal mask wearing in coronavirus hotspots. At a rally in Florida Sunday, Trump suggested he could fire top infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci after the election.
Don't tell anybody, but let me wait till a little bit after the election.
The crowd was chanting, "Fire Fauci." This comes after the Washington Post reported Dr. Fauci said the pandemic would only get worse in the U.S. and that Joe Biden's campaign, quote, is taking the pandemic seriously from a public health perspective, unquote, while Trump is prioritizing, quote, reopening the country. In immigration news, an investigation by Reveal on the Los Angeles Times shows both the Obama and Trump administrations detained tens of thousands of migrant children for longer periods of time than previously known. The report reveals over 25,000 migrant children were detained for more than 100 days in the past 6 years. Nearly 1,000 children were in shelters for more than a year. In related news, the New York Times reports the U.S. has been deporting unaccompanied children from Central America and other countries to Mexico, violating a diplomatic agreement that requires the U.S. to deport them to their home countries where they may be able to reunite with their family. In Poland, an estimated 150,000 people rallied in Warsaw Friday to protest against a court decision banning nearly all forms of abortion. The protests were the biggest since the Solidarity movement of the 1980s.
I am a woman, I am a mother. I have a daughter, and I think I am here not only for myself, but also for my daughter, so that she can live in better times. I want the best for her and for everyone. I think it's important for everyone who lives in Poland.
In Ivory Coast, at least 12 people were killed during protests Saturday as voters headed to the polls. Anti-government protests intensified in the weeks leading up to the election as opponents say the president's bid for a third term is a violation of the constitutional two-term limit. As early results show him in a commanding lead, opposition leaders are calling for a civilian transition from his government. Al Jazeera reports at least 30 people were killed in pre-election violence. In Hong Kong, authorities have arrested 8 opposition politicians over their roles in resisting a controversial new security law that gives China sweeping powers over Hong Kong. The 8 were part of contentious parliamentary hearings last May where they opposed a bill that critics say criminalizes free speech and protests and erases any autonomy Hong Kong once held. This is Wu Chi-wei, chair of Hong Kong's Democratic Party.
We think this is completely unacceptable, and the government has fabricated pretexts and used groundless charges to suppress the opposition voice in the Legislative Council meeting.
Meanwhile, calls are growing for China to release 12 activists arrested at sea in August after they allegedly tried to reach Taiwan from Hong Kong by boat. Lawyers hired by families of the 12 prisoners say they've been harassed by Chinese authorities and have not had any access to their clients. In the Philippines, at least 16 people died and 1 million evacuated as Super Typhoon Goni, the world's strongest typhoon this year, ripped through the island of Luzon on Sunday. Goni is the 18th typhoon to hit the Philippines in 2020. Climate change is causing more intense and more frequent tropical storms in the Philippines, with mass deforestation, mining, and intensive farming further compounding the deadly effects of extreme weather. In Turkey, rescue workers are continuing to search for survivors in the western city of Izmir after a 7.0 magnitude earthquake hit the Aegean Sea Friday, killing at least 80 people in Turkey and 2 people in Greece. Nearly 1,000 people were injured and at least 20 buildings destroyed. And the veteran Middle East reporter and author Robert Fisk has died in Dublin at the age of 74 after a suspected stroke. Fisk spent decades writing for the British newspaper The Independent, where he covered the Iranian Revolution, civil wars in Algeria, the Balkans, Lebanon, and Syria, U.S. sanctions against Iraq, and the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq in 2003. Fisk wrote extensively about the Soviet and U.S. invasions of Afghanistan and interviewed Osama bin Laden 3 times in the 90s, one of the few Western journalists to do so. This is Robert Fisk speaking on Democracy Now! In 2008, just 1 month ahead of the presidential election.
And we start using phrases like victory. We should be talking about phrases like justice for the people of the Middle East. If you have justice, you can build democracy on it. And then we can withdraw all these soldiers. We're always promising people in the Middle East democracy and packages of human rights off our supermarket shelves, and we're always arriving with our horses and our Humvees and our swords and our Apache helicopters and our M1A1 tanks. The only future in the Middle East is to withdraw all our military forces and have serious political, social, religious, cultural relations with these people. It's not our land.
Robert Fisk died at the age of 74 in Dublin. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. The Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We begin today's show in the battleground state of North Carolina. On Saturday, police in Alamance County pepper-sprayed voters taking part in a peaceful Get Out the Vote rally. The rally began at a local black church and was scheduled to end at an early voting site in Graham, North Carolina, which is located between Durham and Greensboro. During the rally, participants stopped near a Confederate monument and paused in the street for 8 minutes and 46 seconds to remember George Floyd, who was killed by police in Minneapolis in May. Floyd's niece was scheduled to speak, but didn't get a chance. Moments later, the police, some dressed in riot gear, began pepper spraying the crowd, which included children as young as 3 years old. One elderly woman in a wheelchair appeared to have had a seizure after being exposed to the pepper spray. Democratic congressional candidate Scott Huffman was pepper sprayed and recorded this video in his car moments later.
Hey, everybody, it's Scott Huffman. I'm running for Congress here in District 13, and my eyes are full of pepper spray because, we were peacefully demonstrating. We were exercising our First Amendment rights with Black Lives Matter, and what I've witnessed is what is happening all over America. This is wrong. People should be allowed to show up to exercise their rights to vote. We're all taxpayers. The police work for us. Yet today I witnessed pepper spray, chemical weapons being sprayed on my fellow Americans.
Saturday was the last day of early voting in North Carolina, but the march never made it to the polling site. At least 8 people were arrested during the rally, including the march organizer, the Reverend Greg Drumright, who joins us now from Greensboro. He's lead organizer of Justice for the Next Generation Coalition. Reverend Greg Drumright, welcome to Democracy Now! Can you take us through Saturday? What happened?
Good morning to all of your viewers, and certainly to you, and thank you for having us. Saturday is, in some instances, still a blur. We still have people recovering from those tear gas and pepper spray attacks. We started the morning really knowing that there was going to be some form of a materialized effort to quell our success and to quiet our voices, even though we prayed intently and we met several times over with the local authorities there, asking them not to bring militia force to our march. As you and I know now, that was not the case.
So explain what the purpose of your rally was, where you went, and when the police moved in and attacked you.
We landed there after marching for about 3/4 of a mile on the north side of Main Street, just before the Court Square, where we were allowed, we were in full cooperation with our agreement with authorities. Once we got to North Main Street in front of a Confederate monument, we kneeled 8 minutes and 46 seconds, as you have uplifted, in honor of George Floyd's family. And I need to say that George Floyd's family, 4 members of the family, was there with us on the front line. After 8 minutes and 46 seconds, we got up and began to prepare for our rally. And just as the Graham Police Department uplifted in their press conference yesterday, at the 9-minute mark, they began to release pepper spray and tear gas upon our marchers, stating that we were not moving fast enough out of the roadways. I don't know if you know arithmetic well enough to discern that that's only 14 seconds for hundreds of people to remove themselves peacefully onto the sidewalks.
So tell us who the sheriff is, and then tell us what happened next once the police tear gassed and pepper sprayed you. Were they wearing riot gear?
We seen all types of tactical force dressings and gear. We petitioned Chief Christy Cole, who was in charge of this. Sheriff Terry Johnson's department, his deputies were working in concert with Chief Christy Cole and the Graham Police Department. We begged them not to bring militia force. We begged them across several letters stating that when this type of police presence gets involved, Black and brown people end up in jail. And so we started our riot with people already being injured, people already being hassled and detained by local police authorities simply because they would not get onto the sidewalks after they escorted us in the streets fast enough. Again, 14 seconds to make something like that happen with a crowd of hundreds of people.
The Graham Police Department held a news conference Sunday to answer questions about the pepper spraying of the marchers at Saturday's event. This is Lieutenant Daniel Sisk.
We wanted them to have a successful event. They were under the same understanding we were, that we thought when the event started that they were not authorized to keep the road closed for an extended period of time, that the road closure was temporary just to accommodate the march, which we led from the chapel, had road closures up to the courthouse. And when we gave the order to clear the road, and when it was clear to our officers that the people had no intent of clearing the road, that's when we deployed the pepper fogger measure just to get them out of the roadway.
So that was Lieutenant Daniel Sisk. And I'm looking at a flyer that was published and distributed by your organization, Justice for the Next Generation, that says on Saturday, October 31st in Graham, North Carolina, participants will be, quote, marching from Wayman's Chapel AME to a Court Square rally at the Confederate Monument and on to Elm Street Pole. So talk about that endpoint. You had hundreds of people. Many were going to vote.
Yes, we believe that many were going to vote. We believe that others were waiting for us to get to the Elm Street poll to vote in concert with us. The truth of the matter is we really don't know what those numbers would have looked like because of this police brutality. We never made it to the polls. And therefore, we believe that this interaction, this interference from local authorities has obstructed our marchers from not only lifting up our First Amendment rights to protest, to speak out, but also our rights to vote. This interaction from the police most certainly kept people from voting in Alamance County.
You know, as people heard this story all over the country, the parallels were being made to Bull Connor, the head of so-called security in Birmingham, who would water hose the people who were going to register to vote, beat people, water hose children. Your thoughts, Reverend Drumright?
This is a sheriff that has been sued by the federal government in 2012. He's been sued by the government for actually disproportionately arresting Black and brown people, even referring to Hispanics as taco eaters. Sheriff Terry Johnson and his department has long suppressed the citizens of Alamance County. There are horror stories. The fear-mongering in Alamance County is very intense. As a matter of fact, as we have organized there all summer long, there are people who are in support of our movement, but fear for their safety. One of our marchers, one of the speakers of our march, uplifted the fact that she, as a business owner, has been targeted. Other members of our march has had the KKK show up in their yard, and all of them have information that lead back to Sheriff Terry Johnson's administration.
And what happened to the woman in the wheelchair?
We seen her yesterday. She is still recovering. She is very sore and she is very shaken, and her spirit, as you might imagine, is broken, but she's not cast down, is what she told me. We are hoping that she makes a full recovery. We believe that she has lost the use of one of her mobile wheelchair units, and therefore we are still fighting for all of the people that are recovering from the incidences on Saturday, and we're going to return to the streets on Tuesday.
Reverend, how did you get arrested?
Did you say how did I get arrested? We were standing there holding our ground because we were permitted to be at the court square until 2 o'clock with our rally. And the police, the law enforcement, the deputies formed a militia line, and they impeded upon us. They wrestled many of the folks that ended up in jail with me onto the ground. Those were people who had already been pepper sprayed by this same police force. I was grabbed by my clothing and roughed up and taken into custody right there in front of the Confederate Monument.
Can you talk about who you met in jail?
I met folks that I didn't know yet. I met people that were there to stand with us in solidarity. I met black folks and white folks in jail. I also met a young man who did not come in with the crew, the particular crew that I was detained with. And I didn't think that he knew who I was. I certainly didn't know who he was. And I had a split second to ask him as he was being released just minutes before me in passing and processing, "Sir, are you going to vote?" He looked at me and said, "Reverend Drumright, I was going to vote with you today."
Finally, I'm looking at a piece from the Triad City Beat in September that said supporters of the president's re-election bid yelled white power from pickup trucks in Trump convoy in Alamance County, organized by neo-Confederate activist Gary Williamson. Can you talk about the climate in your county?
Well, let me just say that it is a known fact that Sheriff Terry Johnson has a relationship with Gary Williamson. From that July 11th event, we have footage of Sheriff Terry Johnson actually being sympathetic, putting his arm around Mr. Williamson and telling Mr. Williamson just to calm down while his same sheriff deputies were being instructed to lock up our peaceful protesters. That's why we are advocating. That's why this was not just a march to the polls, but we had to stop by that Confederate monument and uplift our peaceful message for change. There needs to be police reform in Graham, North Carolina, just as it is being discussed in Minneapolis, Minnesota. This scene from Saturday, and even the scene from July the 11th, where over 200 Confederates and neo-Nazis were allowed access to our march to disparage our efforts, to disrupt our efforts, is all too common right now in North Carolina.
What are your plans for an election day, for Tuesday?
You know, I am banned from Graham until Tuesday. And so we are having to do this under so many different dynamics. We thought that Saturday would end our George Floyd summer and that we would have a little time to rest. We never imagined that we would be planning voter efforts on Tuesday on the streets. And so as soon as our interview wraps and in between other interview opportunities today, we're in very intense meetings to figure out with our very meager resources how we are still going to get people now into their various districts to vote. We also are concerned about the people who can't register to vote now, because Saturday was the last day of registration and voting in one stop. And so we know for a fact that there are people who will not be able to vote simply because of the police brutality that we incurred on Saturday. We do know that our efforts will start at 9 o'clock, and we're asking everyone to stay attuned to our social media for the official announcement of our plans after noon today.
Reverend Greg Drumright, I want to thank you for being with us, lead organizer and activist with Justice for the Next Generation. Next up, we go to Texas, where a caravan of Trump supporters tried to run a Biden campaign bus off the road. One truck swerved into a car full of Biden campaign workers. And a QAnon supporter has sued Harris County, home to Houston, to throw out nearly 127,000 early votes from 10 drive-through polling locations. It goes to court today. Stay with us.
Even though the birds ain't singing and the sun ain't shining, it looks like a beautiful morning. Each day is another chance to do the things I could have done the day before, but didn't and known I should have. So I say a prayer for the gone for gooders who left this world and kiss my girl good morning, sugar. Another sunrise, and as much as I would love to roll over on you, I cannot do it because the good Lord, I prayed to him, and he said, since listening not, so I better have something to say to him. So I'ma tell him how it went down, man. Doing shows for free, going out of town, man. The way I almost broke down and got a 9 to 5 cause I had more press than sound scans. This is the price that I pay for this music, and every word that I write is a testament to it. And if I had to go back, I wouldn't change a thing. Wouldn't recut it, re-edit, or change the frame, cause it would not be fair to turn my back on the struggle when that exact same hustle got me here. Told from the get up, we three the hard way, and Broadway's the only place you ever throw a set up. Speechless is what you be if we ever met up.
Beautiful Morning by Little Brother from Durham, North Carolina. This is Democracy Now!, the Quarantine Report. I'm Amy Goodman as we turn to Texas, where polls show a close race between President Donald Trump and Democratic nominee Joe Biden. On Friday, a caravan of Trump supporters surrounded, then following a Biden campaign bus on a highway between San Antonio and Austin. A Biden campaign official described it as an attempt to slow down the bus and run it off the road. The Dallas Morning News reports one of the pickup trucks that tailgated the bus swerved into a car full of Biden campaign workers, leaving deep dents in the passenger side. There is video of all of this. After the attack, Texas Democrats canceled 3 scheduled campaign events. This came days after the president's eldest son, Donald Trump Jr., called on his father's supporters to, quote, get out there, have some fun. On Saturday, President Trump retweeted part of a video of the incident, writing, quote, I love Texas. Then on Sunday, Trump lashed out at the FBI for investigating it, writing, quote, these patriots did nothing wrong, suggesting they should instead investigate Antifa. This comes as Texas voters have already cast more than 9 million ballots, more than the state's total turnout of the 2016 presidential election. Meanwhile, on Sunday, the Texas Supreme Court denied a request to throw out nearly 127,000 early votes from 10 drive-through polling locations in Harris County, home to Houston. The drive-through polls allowed any registered voter to cast their ballot in their car instead of going inside polling centers. The case will now be heard today before the notoriously conservative U.S. District Judge Andrew Scott Hainan, who was appointed by President George W. Bush. The Harris County Clerk's Office said it created drive-through voting, quote, in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic as a safer, socially distant alternative to walk-in voting for all voters. The office is led by 34-year-old Chris Hollins, the county's youngest and the first black clerk. Hollins also pushed to make it easier for Houstonians to vote during the pandemic by tripling the number of early voting sites. Last week, he kept 8 polling locations open for 24 hours for the first time in Texas history. The result has been record-breaking voter turnout. Critics note the drive-through voting sites now being challenged were originally approved by the Republican Texas Secretary of State and were set up in consultation with local Republican officials. One of the main people who filed the lawsuit challenging the drive-through ballots is right-wing QAnon conspiracy theorist Stephen Hotze, who has called COVID-19, quote, much ado about nothing, and also sued Harris County over its order requiring people to cover their faces in public. The lawsuit claims drive-through sites are unconstitutional, but Harris County Judge Lina Hidalgo, who holds a non-judicial executive position, addressed voters Sunday night and said Texas Supreme Court's decision proves otherwise.
We are working with urgency with the brightest legal team in our state who is working day and night to fight this frivolous litigation that is now in federal court. I do acknowledge that the fact that we're even having this conversation is cause for concern and means that something it needs our attention. We have to be real and put out there that it is bewildering that this is even happening, that these votes that have already been cast that folks are trying to invalidate them. We know we're right on the law. We had drive-through voting for a past runoff election. The Secretary of State has seen our plans for months with no objection. Just a few hours ago, the Texas Supreme Court rejected a petition to have these votes invalidated.
More than 40% of Harris County residents are Latinx, and about 1 in 5 residents are black. For more, we go to Alpine, Texas, where we're joined by Susan Hayes, special counsel to Harris County, Texas, on election matters. She's worked on election laws in Texas for over 20 years. Welcome to Democracy Now!, Susan Hayes. So let's talk about this. The Texas Supreme Court hands down a decision, says these nearly 127,000 votes, ballots, can be counted. Explain what was set up to enable people to vote and what it means going before the federal court today.
Right. First, thank you for having me on today. Harris County has set up 10 separate drive-through locations. 9 of them are these enormous metal framing and tent structures. One of them is in a parking garage at the Toyota Center, one of the major sports arenas in Harris County. Voters pull up, they're greeted by an election worker, just as they might be at a walk-in polling place. They're asked to turn off their cell phone, not converse while they're voting. Their IDs are checked. Texas requires a voter ID. And then they come into the polling station. They sign a roster just as they would in in-person voting. The voting machine, which is attached to a cable, is handed into the voter's window, and they vote from the seat of their car. Hand the machine back. It is sanitized between every voter. We've taken enormous efforts to try to keep the in-person voting as sanitized and safe as possible, given the pandemic. And then they pull on out. It's been enormously popular. About 10% of our in-person votes so far have been through the drive-through locations.
How long has this gone on?
It was pilot tested during a July primary runoff, and we surveyed everyone who went through. The results were incredibly positive. So the Commissioner's Court, which has the power under state law to approve polling locations, voted unanimously, including the 2 Republican members, on August 25th to approve these 10 locations, along with the other 112 early voting locations in Harris County. And it began on the first day of early voting on October 13th. And the Texas Supreme Court has denied 3 separate petitions for writ of mandamus trying to attack and stop the drive-through voting.
So this whole process landed in court. Once again, the Texas State Supreme Court ruled on behalf of what was it, Harris County, said that these votes can be counted. Where does it go now in the federal court? What is it up against?
It is in the middle of last week, an almost identical complaint was filed in the Southern District of Texas. The judge set it for a hearing this morning at 10:30 on a motion for preliminary injunction. And what they're asking for is that these votes be segregated and not counted tomorrow night, which is directly contrary to Texas law. Texas law requires that all the votes be counted. And if any candidate's race is close, then they can file an election contest. An election contest is the remedy to any issues with the voting process, not lawsuits that happen before the election. And we do not know what will happen today with the court. We have an incredibly strong legal team that's been lined up in Houston that will be presenting argument. And a lot of organizations have weighed in to file, including some very prominent Republicans. The former Republican Speaker of the Texas House has filed an amicus brief backing up Harris County and backing up the right for everyone to vote.
So tell us who Stephen Hotze is, who is among those who filed this petition in the federal court to throw out the more than 126,000 vote ballots.
Hotze has been a figure in extreme Texas politics for decades. Decades ago, he lived in Austin and did a lot of anti-LBGT attacks. He was for a while a major power broker in Harris County Republican politics. You didn't get to be a judge in Harris County without his blessing. He published a slate card of people he endorsed, except you had to pay him to get endorsed. And as Harris County has gone blue, his political star has fallen. He's become more and more outrageous, as you explained in your opening report. He has filed 10 separate direct lawsuits at the Texas Supreme Court since the pandemic began. 5 attacking health measures that local officials have taken, particularly Judge Lena Hilago of Harris County, and 5 about election procedures, very focused on Chris Hollins, notably another person of color and in power in Harris County. And the Texas Supreme Court has denied every single one.
QAnon supporter.
Yes. He's been so bad for so long that, in a way, doesn't even add that much to how extreme he's been in Texas politics and the sort of cancerous effect he's had on some Republican politics in Texas.
If the federal court throws out these votes, do all of these people have to vote tomorrow?
That is one potential solution we have, along with the rest of the country since Bush v. Gore, a provisional balloting system. Harris County does have the data of who voted drive-through. And the voters in Harris County, be they Republican, Democratic, or Independent, are very unhappy about this. Some of the voters have intervened in the case, filed late last night. There are about 20 who are named in that intervention, but we have currently over 4,000 other voters signed up to join the lawsuit as well.
Finally, on Saturday, Susan Hayes, Trump tweeted a video of his supporters surrounding the Biden-Harris campaign bus in central Texas, writing, quote, "I love Texas." The president's tweet came after a separate video surfaced showing cars and trucks with Trump 2020 flags encircling Biden's blue campaign bus as it traveled from San Antonio to Austin on a highway. It was it's astounding video. Biden criticized Trump's tweet during a campaign rally in Philadelphia Sunday.
There's a big Greyhound bus-like bus painted blue with Biden's markings on the side. And it was on Interstate Highway in Texas. And a bunch of Trump trucks, pickup trucks with Trump flags, tried to run it off the road. We're stopping it, dropping in front of it. And the president saw it, took the video that someone had taken, and tweeted it back out and said, "I love Texas. I love Texas." We've never had anything like this. At least we've never had a president who thinks it's a good thing.
So that was Biden. On Sunday, Susan Hayes, you tweeted, while all of you were getting excited about Texas turnout or horrified about terrorists trying to run a bus off the road, Texas passed California in COVID cases. Now call everyone you know to vote like your life depended on it. If you can talk about what actually took place, you have a Trump car ramming a car of Biden campaign workers. The FBI now saying they're investigating as Trump tweets, "I love Texas."
You know, what I know is what I've seen through the media, and I watched the video. I'm very familiar with that stretch of highway. It's an incredibly busy area between Austin and San Antonio. It's a dangerous stretch of highway on a good day. But I was very disappointed in the Hays County Sheriff, which is the county just south of Austin, for not seeming alarmed about that. And I also noted that sheriff is on the ballot tomorrow.
And, of course, because there's video, you can see license plates. You can see exactly who did this. This ultimately forced the Biden campaign to cancel their events.
Absolutely. And, you know, I hope that the Department of Public Safety, which would also have jurisdiction over that stretch of highway, is investigating as well. And I would hope the relevant sheriff's departments are investigating as well. And, you know, law enforcement doesn't talk about investigations while they're ongoing, but I would hope that they would quickly wrap that up and arrest whoever was driving that black pickup who tried to run a car off the road in the middle of a busy interstate. You know, the speeds on that interstate regularly exceed 75 miles an hour. I doubt the bus was going that fast, but that's the traffic and the rate along there. It's very dangerous, as I said, on a good day.
Well, I want to thank you very much for joining us. Final question about COVID. I mean, Texas breaking records in early voting, but also around the issue of COVID. Can you talk about the scale of the pandemic and how you think it's going to affect the rest of the election, the record voting in Texas so far?
You know, it's shooting up. Our state government has not handled it well. Our state government has aggressively pushed back on county governments who have tried to handle it. El Paso is having an outbreak, and our attorney general sued the county judge for putting the county on lockdown. You know, I'm speaking to you today from Alpine, Texas, a remote rural area, because my husband has underlying conditions. And we came here to try to be safe. It's now hit the rural counties with a vengeance, in part because of all the messaging coming from President Trump and coming from, you know, people like Steve Holtze who deny medicine and deny science, trying to minimize what people should be doing. And it's killing people. It's killing people in the rural communities. It's killing people along the border, Latinx who are more susceptible to it. It's awful.
Susan Hayes, I want to thank you for being with us. Special counsel to Harris County, Texas on election matters, worked on election laws in Texas for over 20 years. Next, we go to the battleground state of Florida to speak with Haitian-American author Edwidge Danticat, talk about how more than 250,000 U.S.-born children could be separated from their parents. And we'll speak with one of them. Stay with us. by Futuro Conjunta. This is Democracy Now! I'm Amy Goodman. We end today's show in the key battleground state of Florida, which could decide the presidential election. Many political analysts say Trump has little chance of winning the Electoral College if he loses in Florida, which has 29 electoral votes. We turn now to look at how Trump and Biden's immigration plans could impact the race in Florida. Over 273,000 U.S.-born children could be separated from their parents should Trump win re-election and terminate TPS. That's the Temporary Protected Status Program, which has protected migrants from El Salvador, Haiti, Honduras, Nicaragua, Sudan, and Nepal. Tens of thousands of TPS recipients live in Florida. The award-winning Haitian-American author Edwidge Danticat writes about this in her new piece headlined, "Be the Vote for Immigrant Families Under Threat by the Trump Administration." Edwidge Danticat joins us from Miami, along with 13-year-old Christina Pantieu, the U.S.-born daughter of two TPS recipients from Haiti. Christina is a member of Family Action Network Movement, or FAM, and a co-chair of the group's Children for Family Reunification Initiative. She testifies any place she can to talk about what's happening. Edwidge Danticat, we are on the eve of the election. Talk about what's at stake.
Good morning, Amy, and thank you so much for having us. There is a great deal at stake overall. I mean, I think for so many issues, for immigration, for COVID, for healthcare. But what's specifically with Christina today is at stake is the fact that whether she will be able to stay with her family or she and other children in the same situation as her. There's so many of them. And Christina has a very powerful story. And when I met her in 2007 was the first time that TPS was announced terminated. And then lawsuits have kept it going. Ramos versus Nielsen in California, and Saget versus Trump, which is a case that now is basically really the only wall between the full termination of TPS and children like Christina being able to stay in the only country that they've ever known.
Well, let's bring Christina in right now. I want to read the beginning, Edwidge, of your of the op-ed that you wrote. I have never seen a child work so hard to keep her family together. For the past 4 years, Christina Pantieu, 13, has been addressing rallies, attending congressional briefings and press conferences, writing open letters, and recording videos addressed to elected officials, including House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and President Donald Trump. Christina, tell us your story, your family story, your parents' story, how you all came to the United States, how they came, and you were born here.
Thank you for having me. Well, my parents, they came from Haiti, and they've been living in the U.S. for about 20 years now, and they came in 1999, where they came to America for a better life, just because in Haiti, they couldn't really make their future a lot better. They didn't see their future getting better in where they were living. And in 2010, they were granted TPS because of the earthquake that happened there. And they've been living here ever since 1999.
And just to be clear, this earthquake, 300,000 Haitians died in the earthquake.
Yes, and many people were affected. We lost a lot of family that we had there, and so that granted them TPS and many other people TPS too. And so they've been living here for 20 years, and I believe it is 2017 that President Trump was mentioning that he's terminating TPS. And because of this, terminating TPS would affect all of us, especially kids like me who are U.S.-born children who've never been to their parents' country before. And there's other children who may or may not even speak their parents' language, their home country's language. So many of us could be affected on whether TPS is terminated or not. And I found out about this when I was 9 years old. And I found out that my parents could be taken away from me at any time, and there was nothing that I could really do about it. And I, for the first time, started public speaking in this interview. And they realized that I could do something with my voice. And ever since then, I've been public speaking. I've been going to rallies. I've been going to Washington to speak with Congress on this issue. And it's been about 4 years now.
Your parents are nurses?
Yes. My mom is a LPN and my dad is a RN licensed, registered nurse.
Now, you're 13, so you can't vote. What do you tell kids your age to do?
Well, I cannot personally vote, and there are other kids who cannot vote because of my age. But I do tell kids my age to, encourage their parents to vote because they can, give their parents a little idea, what, I should vote. And I do speak to adults too. And I tell them it's very important that you vote because even though it is one vote, many votes together can make a difference. And your vote really does matter and it does count.
And Florida sure does make a difference. The other day we reported on The Guardian reporting that the Trump administration has significantly increased deportations to Haiti in the weeks before the presidential election, triggering concerns for the safety of asylum seekers and the possible spread of coronavirus in Haiti. The watchdog group Witness at the Border has recorded at least 12 deportation flights to Haiti this month. This comes as immigrant advocates say black asylum seekers are being disproportionately targeted. Earlier this month, 60 Cameroonian and over 24 Congolese asylum seekers were deported en masse, many alleging ICE agents tortured them to force them to sign removal papers. And I wanted to bring Edwidge Danticat back into this conversation. I was speaking to someone who is engaged in a black turnout the vote effort in Massachusetts, who said she spoke to someone, a Haitian-American woman who'd lived here for decades, could vote, and she said that she was afraid to go to the polls on Election Day because she was afraid she would be deported. Can you talk about the chilling effect this has, and if you think that's part of the intention, all of this activity right before the election, Edwidge?
Absolutely, Amy. I think this is part of voter suppression is such a part of Election Day, especially in such an important election in the United States. We know the long history of trying to disenfranchise people to take away their ability to vote. Now there's another layer of it, I think, with immigration and people who are citizens, all the ways that they are going to make it harder to vote because Miami-Dade, where we live, can potentially decide this election. So I expect tomorrow there'll probably be a lot of obstacles placed in the paths of people of color, immigrants, people who might be voting for the first time. So I'm not surprised by that. I'm also, with the deportations, that seems to be part of, the start of part two of this, of the Trump administration's immigration policies. The other day, Stephen Miller outlined what they were going to do, all the restrictions and the deportations, especially the most recent deportations during COVID-19 seem to have accelerated in the last weeks towards that path. They seem to be trying to attack on both fronts, and both on this voter suppression front and also on this immigration front.
You wrote a piece earlier this year for the New Yorker magazine titled "The Ripple Effects of the Coronavirus on Immigrant Communities." As we move into this election and this record surge of COVID-19 throughout Florida, throughout Texas, throughout the Midwest, the upper Midwest, across the country, the effects you fear this will have on the election. And also, if you can comment on President Trump coming to Little Haiti in Florida years ago, and saying when he was running for president, saying he will represent Haitian Americans.
Well, I think very few, I did not believe that he was going to represent our greatest champion, as he mentioned. But it's actually been worse than he actually hinted, with these deportations, certainly, that are accelerated during COVID-19, the family reunification removed. Haitians can no longer apply for work visas, certain work visas that were available to us before. So that is certainly the opposite of that promise. But I think the ripple effects certainly are throughout the immigrant community where we live. Miami-Dade, which is going to be such an important part of this election, because we have quite a lot of immigration to Miami. And people during COVID, we've had a disproportionate probably number of deaths here as well. And people who are immigrants might be more afraid to go for health care, right? Because they might worry, for example, if they're on the process to immigration, they might worry about the public charge, about having a green card not available to them later on, which then would reduce their chances of progressing, of becoming citizens. So there's a lot, there's so much at stake. And I think Christina, which is one of the reasons that I wanted to write about her in this piece, gives us a new way of looking at voting. Maybe some people who are jaded about voting, she reminds us, and all my neighbors remind us that, you know, our vote really affects not just us, but people around the world.
And finally, Edwidge, the whole country, maybe the world, is looking at Florida. Absolutely key state. In order for Donald Trump to win, he must win Florida. What are you looking at in these last 30 seconds that we have?
Well, I'm looking at tomorrow, the turnout. I hope that they won't be putting mountains in people's ways, that they'll be able to come out and vote in large numbers and vote for themselves and vote for their neighbors and really vote for the future. People like Christina, young people like that who are counting on us, vote for them.
Well, I want to thank both of you for joining us from the key battleground state of Florida. Edwidge Danticat, the Haitian-American novelist, and Christina Pontieu of the Family Action Network movement, co-chair of the group's Children for Family Reunification Initiative. One of 273,000 U.S.-born children who could be separated from their parents if Trump wins re-election and terminates temporary protected status. Finally, this reminder. Tomorrow, Tuesday, November 3rd, Democracy Now! Will air a 3-hour election night special from 9 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. You can watch it live on our website at democracynow.org. We'll cover the results from the presidential election to congressional and state races, as well as ballot initiatives around the country. Democracy Now's Election Night Special will feature interviews and perspectives you won't hear anywhere else. We'll include voices of activists, analysts, grassroots leaders discussing how the movements on the ground will go forward following this historic election, and we'll discuss election protection. We'll discuss the voting around the country. Again, it's 9 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. You can watch at democracynow.org, or also stations across the country can run the Democracy Now! Special. That does it for our show. Democracy Now! Is produced with Renee Feltz, Mike Burke, Dina Guzder, Libby Rainey, Nermeen Sheikh, Maria Tenosena, Carla Wills, Tammy Warrenoff, Tarina Nadura, Sam Alkoff, Tamari Astudio, John Hamilton, Robbie Karen, Honey Massoud, and Adriana Contreras. Special thanks to Julie Crosby and Becca Staley. I'm Amy Goodman. Save lives, wear a mask.